Well, that was a very different life, just to clarify. Or rather, I should say, it was actually very nearly the end of my life. 2 years ago yesterday, on September the 3rd, my life was saved. I was very lucky. I would even use the word blessed. It's a wonderful thing to be able to look back into the night, so to speak, and be thankful that we found the dawn, because unfortunately, not all of us do. I won't go into the depths of my life story, but suffice to say that I was working as a pastor and church founder in Ghana, West Africa, at the culmination of what I would say was a religiously toxic upbringing in many ways. You see, although I was living out a strong calling, and although I was exactly where I wanted to be, in Africa, among people with whom I built community, and although in the traditional Christian sense of things I was encountering remarkable success, I was slowly being poisoned. I'm sure that many of you can echo the sentiment that even when your heart is in the right place, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that your faith is. We put faith in religious beliefs for many reasons. We may sincerely believe that a certain doctrine is true, or at least we want it to be true. We may be raised to believe that the doctrine is true, find a sense of meaning in the doctrine, or at least find a sense of community amongst those who share that same doctrine. More sinisterly, we may believe a doctrine out of guilt, out of shame, out of fear, out of pressure, out of anxiety of being otherwise rejected, or out of a need to find some sort of control about the future of our lives after death. There are many, many reasons for which we have faith in religious beliefs. And I will quite boldly say that my faith was not in the right place, and that my doctrine was without a doubt not true. You see, although my heart was in the right place, the faith that I had been spoon-fed and which I had come to internalise had indoctrinated within me certain truths about myself which were lies. That faith told me with unrelenting savageness that I was somehow evil in my essence, spoiled in my sexuality, abominable before God, and entirely unlovable as the person that I was. And as such, much of my religious environment taught me to believe that there was something fundamentally wrong with me, to hate what that was about me, and to spend years and years of wasted energy trying to change who I was. That's toxic religion, and many of you here are no strangers to it. When I was saved 2 years ago from that faith poisoning, I had to kick and bite and scratch and claw my way out of that oppressive religious box that only destroyed lives with its impossible burdens and which would do nothing to bring peace to mankind. In the field of psychology, religion is... A couple more slides on. Yep, fantastic. In the field of psychology, religion is a bit of a paradox. Go to any good psychological journal and you'll no doubt find studies that tell the profoundly positive effects of Christian religion in many lives. Religious beliefs have been found to give a sense of peace and well-being, to aid in the management of illness, and to provide a sense of belonging with fellow believers, just to name a few. But on the contrary, in the lives of sexual minority persons, allow me just to say LGBT persons, religion is very often a force of great destructiveness, of pain, of judgment, of rebuke, and of fear. In fact, research shows that religion has been connected with prejudice for a very long time. In the past, using selective texts of scripture, the church has opposed the abolition of slavery, equal rights for people of colour, permitting interracial marriage and equality for women, that's just to name a few. Studies consistently show that the more religious people are, the more likely they are to be opposed to homosexuality and LGBT persons. In the political sphere, conservative church groups and the religious right have tirelessly lobbied against basic civil and human rights for sexual minority people, historically labelling them a danger for the fabric of society and family life, and an abomination against God, and sexually perverse. The Roman Catholic Church officially states that homosexuals are intrinsically disordered towards evil, and other research shows that being part of a Protestant denomination or being a born-again Christian increases the likelihood of believing that homosexuality is a choice, and obviously in their view, an evil choice away from God. In addition, Christian psychologists and church ministries continue to encourage the use of therapies that attempt to change a person's sexual orientation, despite the fact that all major international medical and psychological bodies stand firmly against this. These ex-gay ministries often leave behind an incredible legacy of suffering, suicidality, and mental health problems. Furthermore, LGBT people of faith may grow up in religious environments that are exempt from many anti-discrimination policies, where homosexuality is publicly denounced and where LGBT persons may be threatened with hell, shunned by their family, excommunicated from the church, refused ordination, sacraments and religious employment, and publicly defamed. And so it's really not surprising, is it, that many such individuals feel distress, guilt and self-hatred, perceiving not just rejection from the world, but rejection from God. Basically, this is toxic religion at its worst, creating a stigmatising climate that refuses to accept a person in the wholeness of their sexuality. Many LGBT persons are forced to split themselves into two parts, the acceptable and the shameful, and live in the unhealthiest way possible, in fear, anxious of being outed, closeting important parts of their being, and all the while carrying around a pretty toxic load of guilt. We were never meant to crucify our sexuality, although toxic religious voices would call for us to do so. Next slide. Now, I live by a fairly basic principle. Some might even call it heretical, but actually I base it in the scriptures. In John chapter 10, Jesus talks about being a shepherd, and a good one, and he brings with him life and fullness and abundance. The thief, on the other hand, demonstrates that he cares nothing for the sheep, and he leads them to their peril. Similarly, Paul talks in Corinthians 13 about the abundance of the Spirit, that the evidence of the wholesomeness of God in a person's life is manifest in love, in joy, in peace and more. The Gospels back this up, and they speak of the quality of a person's life being like a tree, bearing either good fruit or bad. As a recent, rather cheesy Christian campaign said, Jesus really is all about life. He's about freedom, of leading the sheep to green pastures where they may come and go freely, in safety, in peace, and in abundance. He's not about death and darkness and misery. In fact, if the scriptures tell us anything, the only point of his suffering was to actually overcome these things. And so I find myself asking the question, if by attempting to follow the traditional, mainstream, Christian, anti-gay doctrine, I find myself struggling under a burden that no man can lift off, trapped in a bottomless pit of self-hatred, troubled with no escape from the misery of being unable to change who I am, and perhaps even walking towards suicide as a result of a religion-sexuality conflict, then does that doctrine bear the hallmark of the Good Shepherd? Or could it be perhaps something more of the thief, of the Pharisee? Alternatively, if instead I worship God in the embracing of myself, in all my wholeness, thankful for my sexuality, finding purpose and abundance and healing, and accepting myself just as God accepts me, does that not bear something more of a hallmark of the Good Shepherd? My simple principle is that Jesus is all about life, and that therefore good theology has a hallmark of good psychology. That is, following God should bring freedom, healing, wholeness, joy, thankfulness and self-acceptance. But if following any traditional doctrine leads to the degradation of who a person is, or a decline in their mental health, then that doctrine cannot be from